In an age of heroes and legends, one name strikes more fear than any other: Darth Vader. The rhythmic sound of his breathing, the ominous swish of his cape, the blood-red glow of his lightsaber. He is more machine than man, twisted and evil, yet he began as Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one destined to bring balance to the Force. But destiny had other plans. From the scorching sands of Tatooine to the molten rivers of Mustafar, Vader's path to darkness changed the fate of the galaxy forever. His suit is a prison of eternal agony. His power is unmatched. His rage is endless. And for 20 years, his name alone was enough to make systems fall silent in terror. Tonight, we uncover every dark secret, every brutal mission, and every painful moment that forged the galaxy's most feared enforcer. This is not just another Star Wars story. This is the complete truth about the Dark Lord of the Sith. This is Darth Vader. The story of Darth Vader begins with an impossible birth. In the harsh deserts of Tatooine, 42 years before the Battle of Yavin, a slave woman named Shmi Skywalker discovered she was carrying a child she could not explain. This child, born without a father, would grow to become the most feared enforcer in the galaxy. The Jedi Order had long prophesied this moment, speaking of a chosen one who would restore balance to the Force. Their ancient texts foretold a being born of no father who would fundamentally alter the galaxy's destiny. None could have predicted that this prophesied savior would first become its greatest terror. When Qui-Gon Jinn discovered 9-year-old Anakin Skywalker in 32 BBY, he found something unprecedented. A child with over 20,000 midichlorians per cell, the highest concentration ever recorded. Even Master Yoda, the most powerful Jedi of the era, didn't approach these levels. This reading, combined with Anakin's miraculous birth, convinced Qui-Gon he had found the chosen one. But darkness lurked behind this seeming miracle. While Imperial records are carefully sanitized, whispers persist of Sith manipulation at the highest levels. The Sith Lord Darth Plagueis, master of Darth Sidious, had been conducting experiments in the creation of life itself through midichlorian manipulation. His obsession with conquering death led to attempts to create life directly from the Force, a violation of nature that would have horrific consequences. These experiments, known in some circles as the Grand Experiment, took place on the moon Sojourn. Though Plagueis initially deemed his work a failure, the timing aligned suspiciously with Anakin's conception. Some believe the midichlorians themselves retaliated against this dark side manipulation by creating their own vessel, Anakin Skywalker. The implications were staggering. If true, this would mean the very powers of darkness trying to corrupt the Force had inadvertently created the one prophesied to destroy them. Darth Sidious, upon learning of Anakin's existence, saw not a threat, but an opportunity. Where his master Plagueis saw doom for the Sith, Sidious recognized the potential to corrupt the Chosen One himself. Shmi Skywalker raised her miraculous son in slavery, watching as he displayed incredible natural abilities that would later serve him as both Jedi and Sith. His pod racing skills, seemingly impossible for a human child, were early manifestations of his incredible Force sensitivity. But more than this, they were proof of the raw power flowing through his veins, power that would one day fuel the dark side's greatest servant. The circumstances of his birth would haunt Anakin throughout his life. Questions about his origin and purpose tormented him, contributing to the internal conflict that would eventually help Palpatine seduce him to the dark side. Vader himself would later master many of the dark side abilities that might have been used in his own creation, including techniques for prolonging and creating life that mirror Plagueis' experiments. In a cruel twist of fate, Shmi's death would become a catalyst for Anakin's fall. After being sold to moisture farmer Klieg Lars, who freed and married her, she was captured by Tusken Raiders in 22 BBY. Her torture and death in Anakin's arms triggered his first major embrace of the dark side, as he slaughtered not just the warriors, but the women and children too. This massacre was the first sign that the Chosen One's power could be turned toward darkness. The loss of his mother created in Anakin an overwhelming fear of death itself. This fear would later drive him to embrace Palpatine's promises of power over death, leading directly to his transformation into Darth Vader. The very circumstances of his miraculous birth meant to bring balance to the Force, instead laid the groundwork for the galaxy's descent into darkness. Lord Vader would later rarely speak of his origins. The mystery of his birth became yet another aspect of the terror he inspired. Many Imperial officers whispered that their dark enforcer was something other than human, a being of pure darkness given form. In a way, they weren't entirely wrong. Vader's origins in the Force itself, whether through natural conception or Sith manipulation, made him unique among both Jedi and Sith. The prophecy would ultimately prove true, though not as the Jedi expected. Anakin Skywalker did bring balance to the Force, but only after first becoming Darth Vader and helping to destroy the very order that discovered him. His birth, whether engineered by the Sith or manifested by the Force itself, set in motion events that would reshape the galaxy for generations to come. In the end, Vader's origin story is one of manipulation on a cosmic scale. The Force itself, the dark side, the Sith, and the Jedi all played their parts in creating and shaping the being who would become the galaxy's most feared enforcer. The miracle of his birth would be matched only by the tragedy of his fall and the triumph of his final redemption. The being who would become Darth Vader entered the galaxy as a slave. Born on Tatooine in 32 BBY, Anakin Skywalker's earliest memories were of chains and desert heat. But even in bondage, his power could not be contained. While other slaves accepted their fate, young Skywalker dreamed of the stars. Under Watto's ownership, Anakin channeled his frustrations into mechanics and racing. He built droids from scraps, repaired vehicles other mechanics deemed worthless, and most importantly, learned to pod race. These weren't just hobbies. They were manifestations of Force powers that would one day make him the galaxy's most feared enemy. The same precognitive abilities that let him navigate pods at lethal speeds would later help him hunt down and exterminate the Jedi. His mother, Shmi, watched his abilities grow with a mixture of pride and fear. She knew her son was different. While other human children could barely manage simple tasks, Anakin was building functioning protocol droids and winning impossible races. The Force flowed through him more powerfully than any being in recorded history, though neither mother nor child understood its true nature yet. Everything changed when Qui-Gon Jinn's damaged ship landed on Tatooine. The Jedi Master immediately sensed something extraordinary about the slave boy. It wasn't just Anakin's mechanical talents or his pod racing abilities. There was something deeper. When tested, Anakin's blood revealed midi-chlorian counts that broke every record in Jedi history, over 20,000 per cell. Qui-Gon saw opportunity where others would later see danger. He engineered a bet with Watto. If Anakin won the Boonta Eve Classic pod race, he would earn his freedom. The race itself became legend. A 9-year-old human child competing in a sport that regularly killed adult aliens, piloting a pod he built himself from salvaged parts. His victory proved what Qui-Gon already suspected. This was no ordinary child. But freedom came at a terrible price. While Anakin won his release, his mother remained enslaved. This separation created the first crack in his psyche, a wound that would never truly heal. The boy who would become Vader begged his mother not to make him leave, showing the attachment and fear that the Jedi Council would later cite as reasons to reject his training. When Qui-Gon presented Anakin to the Jedi Council, he faced unanimous opposition. Master Yoda, peering into the boy's future, saw shadows of what was to come. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering, the ancient master warned. They sensed too much emotion, too much attachment, too much potential for darkness. These same traits would later make Vader the perfect apprentice for Darth Sidious. The death of Qui-Gon Jinn on Naboo sealed Anakin's fate. His strongest advocate fell to Darth Maul's blade, leaving him in the care of a reluctant Obi-Wan Kenobi. While Kenobi would become a brother to Anakin, he never fully understood the trauma carried by the former slave. The Council's fear of Anakin's power, combined with the loss of Qui-Gon's guidance, created a distance between Skywalker and the Jedi that would never fully close. Throughout his years as Darth Vader, these early experiences shaped his reign of terror. The mechanical skills learned in Watto's shop helped him modify and maintain his life support suit. The piloting abilities honed in pod racing made him legendary in space combat. Even his experience as a slave gave him intimate knowledge of suffering, which he would use to maximize the fear he inspired in others. Years later, aboard the Death Star, as Vader tortured rebels and hunted Jedi, echoes of that slave boy from Tatooine remained. The same extraordinary powers that once let him win impossible races now let him strangle officers from across star systems. The mechanical genius that built droids from scraps now maintained the complex systems keeping him alive. Even his legendary rage traced back to those early years, to a child forced to leave his mother in chains. This origin in slavery helped make Vader the perfect enforcer for an empire built on oppression. He understood domination intimately from both sides. As a slave, he had been powerless. As Darth Vader, he would never be powerless again. The fear he remembered feeling as a child became the fear he inspired throughout the galaxy. The chains he once wore became the invisible chains of imperial power, stretched across thousands of worlds. The boy who left Tatooine carried within him both limitless potential and the seeds of darkness. His extraordinary abilities, coupled with the emotional wounds of slavery and separation, created the perfect conditions for his eventual fall. In Darth Vader, we see both the fulfillment of that incredible potential and its tragic perversion, a living testament to how the galaxy's greatest hope became its darkest nightmare. Under Obi-Wan Kenobi's tutelage, Anakin Skywalker's raw power found focus and form. The same abilities that once let him pod race would now be channeled into Jedi training, though the transition proved far from smooth. Obi-Wan, still grieving Qui-Gon's death, took on a Padawan he wasn't ready for, while Anakin struggled with an order that viewed him with suspicion. The boy's combat training revealed both his incredible potential and the darkness within him. His connection to the Force was unprecedented, described by Anakin himself as plugging into a supernova. This raw power made him exceptional in lightsaber combat, but it also frightened his instructors. Where other Padawans learned to gentle their strikes, Anakin's attacks carried lethal intent, a habit formed in the brutal arena of slavery. His first lightsaber reflected this duality. Built with chunky controls and thick ridges, it was a weapon that showcased both his mechanical genius and his need for overwhelming force. This saber would eventually be destroyed in the droid foundries of Geonosis, but its aggressive design hinted at the fighting style that would make Vader legendary. Traditional Jedi exercises often frustrated Skywalker. During meditation sessions with floating rocks, a standard Jedi training technique, Anakin would grow restless. He could perform the tasks perfectly, but the calm focus they required eluded him. These same skills would later serve him in combat as he learned to weaponize even simple Force techniques. But the peaceful applications remained a struggle. The Jedi restrictions chafed at him constantly. Having known only the harsh rules of slavery, Anakin found himself bound by a different kind of code. The Jedi preached detachment while he desperately missed his mother. They demanded calm while his emotions raged like a storm. Every restriction became another chain, eerily familiar to a former slave. At a young age, Anakin had already proven himself on several important missions, yet he remained an outsider. Fellow Padawans found him difficult to understand. He maintained what one peer described as an aloofness, a reserve that none could penetrate. The same isolation that would later make Vader so terrifying began in these formative years. His mechanical aptitude, rather than being celebrated, was often dismissed by the Council. Mace Windu once complained about stumbling over the droids Anakin built to cope with his anxiety. This rejection of his coping mechanisms pushed Anakin toward more dangerous outlets. He began sneaking out of the temple to participate in illegal races, seeking the same rush that had once made pod racing bearable. The nightmares that plagued young Anakin were similarly dismissed. When he dreamed of his mother's pain, Obi-Wan assured him dreams pass in time. This dismissal of his Force visions would have fatal consequences, both for Shmi Skywalker and later for the Jedi Order itself. The power that could have warned them of coming darkness was instead treated as a distraction to be overcome. Obi-Wan's training style, focused on strict adherence to the Jedi Code, often clashed with Anakin's intuitive approach to the Force. Where Kenobi sought to curb his Padawan's aggressive tendencies, these same traits would later make Vader one of the most feared duelists in the galaxy. The very qualities the Jedi tried to suppress would become weapons in the Sith arsenal. Perhaps most crucially, Anakin's years as a Padawan taught him to hide his true self. Unable to express his fears, anger, or attachments openly, he learned to maintain a facade of Jedi serenity while turmoil raged within. This skill at compartmentalizing would later help him fully embrace the persona of Darth Vader, separating himself completely from Anakin Skywalker. The Council's constant suspicion of Anakin created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Their fear of his power and emotional nature pushed him toward the very darkness they dreaded. As Palpatine would later observe, the Jedi's treatment of their chosen one stored up trouble for the future. Every dismissal, every restriction, every moment of isolation became another crack in Anakin's loyalty to the Order. By the time he approached knighthood, Anakin had mastered many Jedi arts while never truly embracing Jedi philosophy. His combat skills were unmatched, his Force abilities legendary, but his heart remained that of an outsider looking in. The perfect training ground, though the Jedi didn't realize it, for the man who would one day destroy their order. The Council's failure to properly address Anakin's emotional needs created the perfect opening for Palpatine's manipulation. Where the Jedi offered restrictions, Palpatine offered understanding. Where they demanded detachment, he encouraged Anakin's passions. The same powers the Jedi feared, Palpatine praised. This dynamic, established during Anakin's Padawan years, would eventually lead to the birth of Darth Vader. Throughout the Clone Wars, Anakin Skywalker transformed from a reckless Jedi Knight into one of the Republic's most formidable military commanders. His aggressive tactics and frontline leadership foreshadowed the methods that would later make Vader legendary. Just as Vader would personally lead assaults on rebel bases, General Skywalker fought alongside his troops rather than commanding from safety. The Battle of Christophsis marked a crucial turning point. Here, Anakin received his Padawan, Ahsoka Tano, initially rejecting the idea of being a mentor. This relationship would shape both his leadership style and his eventual fall. Through Ahsoka, we see glimpses of both Anakin's compassion and the possessive attachment that would help turn him to the dark side. Under his command, the 501st Legion became one of the most effective fighting forces in the Republic. The same troops who would later help him purge the Jedi Temple first earned their reputation through victories on Christophsis, Geonosis, and Ryloth. Anakin's unconventional strategies often clashed with traditional Republic military doctrine, just as Vader would later frustrate Imperial commanders with his aggressive tactics. The Second Battle of Geonosis showcased both his brilliance and recklessness. Leading a major assault alongside Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ki-Adi-Mundi, Anakin displayed the same relentless determination that would make Vader unstoppable. His forces suffered heavy casualties in the initial landing, but Anakin's persistence secured a crucial victory, destroying the Separatist droid factories. His relationship with Ahsoka evolved from reluctant master to devoted mentor. Their bond grew through countless battles, with Anakin teaching her the same aggressive combat style he favored. When Ahsoka was framed for bombing the Jedi Temple, Anakin's fierce loyalty in defending her echoed the same intensity he showed in protecting Padme. Her eventual departure from the Order deepened his disillusionment with the Jedi, pushing him further toward Palpatine's influence. The liberation of Ryloth demonstrated Anakin's skill in space combat. Commanding from the bridge of his Venator-class Star Destroyer, he led his fighter squadrons personally, presaging how Vader would later hunt rebels in his TIE Advanced. His strategies emphasized overwhelming force, combined with precise strikes, a methodology that would become Imperial doctrine under Vader's command. On Anaxes, facing the brilliant Separatist Admiral Trench, Anakin displayed the ruthless efficiency that would become Vader's trademark. His victory here proved pivotal in the war's final stages, though the cost in lives reflected his growing comfort with casualties as acceptable losses, a mindset that would serve him well as the Emperor's enforcer. Throughout the war, Anakin developed a reputation for both inspiring loyalty and instilling fear. Clone troopers under his command respected his willingness to fight alongside them, while enemies learned to dread his approach. This duality, the beloved general who was also a terror to his foes, previewed the fearsome figure he would become. Unlike many Jedi generals, Anakin viewed his clone troopers as individuals rather than units. He learned their names, understood their personalities, and mourned their losses. This personal connection made them more effective under his command, but also foreshadowed how deeply Order 66 would affect him as his own troops turned against the Jedi. The Battle of Coruscant, while technically a victory, marked the beginning of his end. His rescue of Palpatine showcased his incredible abilities, but also tightened the Chancellor's grip on his psyche. The same skills that made him a legendary general, his aggression, his willingness to take extreme action, his loyalty to individuals over institutions, would soon serve him as a Sith Lord. When Order 66 came, Anakin's military experience made him devastatingly effective at leading the assault on the Jedi Temple. He understood Jedi tactics, knew their vulnerabilities, and commanded troops who were fanatically loyal to him. The greatest general of the Clone Wars became the architect of the Jedi's destruction. This transformation from Republic hero to Imperial enforcer wasn't just a change in allegiance. It was the culmination of traits developed throughout the war. The aggressive tactics, the personal leadership style, the willingness to accept casualties, the ability to inspire both loyalty and terror. All these aspects of General Skywalker became amplified in Lord Vader. The seeds of Vader's creation were planted in a secret wedding ceremony on Naboo. Following the Battle of Geonosis, Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala were married by Pontifex Maxiron Agolerga, with only C-3PO and R2-D2 as witnesses. This forbidden union marked Anakin's first major rejection of Jedi doctrine, establishing a pattern of deception that would define his final years as a Jedi. Their marriage existed in shadows. Every 4 months, Anakin would return to Coruscant, stealing brief moments with his wife between battles. The constant secrecy and separation bred anxiety and possessiveness in the young Jedi. These same fears of loss that haunted his marriage would later drive him to the dark side in an attempt to save Padme's life. The darkness within Anakin erupted when his mother died. For weeks he experienced Force visions of Shmi in agony. The Jedi Council dismissed these visions, with Obi-Wan telling him dreams pass in time. This dismissal proved fatal. When Anakin finally defied the Council to return to Tatooine, he found his mother had been captured and tortured by Tusken raiders. Shmi died in his arms, managing only to whisper, "I love," before death claimed her. What followed revealed the monster lurking within the Chosen One. Anakin slaughtered the entire Tusken village. This massacre marked his first major embrace of the dark side, channeling grief into genocidal rage in a way that prefigured Vader's future atrocities. Significantly, Anakin confessed this slaughter only to Padme and Palpatine. He couldn't bring himself to tell Obi-Wan or the Council, knowing they wouldn't understand. This created another secret to maintain, another wedge between him and the Jedi Order. The guilt and shame of his actions, combined with anger at the Jedi for leaving his mother in slavery, poisoned his relationship with the Order. The Council's rigid adherence to tradition increasingly frustrated Anakin. His unconventional battle tactics during the Clone Wars often defied Jedi teachings, prioritizing victory over their more cautious approaches. He questioned their decisions openly, especially their distrust of Chancellor Palpatine, whom Anakin viewed as a mentor and friend. His close relationship with Palpatine particularly concerned the Council. While they grew increasingly suspicious of the Chancellor's accumulating power, Anakin continued to confide in him. Palpatine offered the understanding and acceptance that Anakin felt the Jedi denied him, setting the stage for his eventual manipulation of the Chosen One. The burden of maintaining his secret marriage weighed heavily on Anakin's psyche. He lived in constant fear of discovery, knowing that exposure would mean expulsion from the Jedi Order and scandal for Padme. This pressure, combined with long separations during the Clone Wars, made him increasingly possessive and paranoid. Each mission away from Padme heightened his anxiety. The same premonitions that had warned him of his mother's death now haunted him with visions of losing his wife. The Council's emphasis on detachment offered no comfort to a man terrified of losing everyone he loved. Instead, he began searching for ways to prevent death itself, a quest that would lead him to embrace Sith teachings. The Council's decision to grant him a seat while denying him the rank of Master became the breaking point. After years of exceptional service in the Clone Wars, this perceived insult crystallized everything Anakin resented about the Jedi. Their continued distrust, their rigid adherence to rules he saw as arbitrary, their inability to acknowledge his power and achievements, all pushed him further from their light. This period established the psychological foundation for Vader's creation. Every secret Anakin kept, every rule he broke, every dark impulse he hid from the Council prepared him for his eventual fall. The same determination that let him maintain his secret marriage would later let him maintain his facade as Vader. The rage that drove him to slaughter Tuskens would fuel his hunt for Jedi. The fear of losing Padme would drive him to embrace powers the Jedi forbidden. What began with a secret wedding ended with the death of the Republic. Anakin's growing defiance of Jedi doctrine, his unprocessed trauma from his mother's death, and his increasing isolation from the Order created the perfect conditions for Palpatine's corruption. The darkness that would make Vader legendary was already there, waiting to be unleashed. The grooming of Anakin Skywalker stands as one of the most calculated and patient acts of manipulation in galactic history. What makes it particularly chilling is how early it began, with Palpatine first setting his sights on young Anakin during his teenage years at the Jedi Temple, recognizing in him a power that could be twisted to serve the dark side. During a training session where Palpatine observed the young Padawan, he witnessed something that confirmed his suspicions, an emotional outburst that revealed Anakin's inner turmoil. It was all Palpatine needed to see. Using his position as Supreme Chancellor, he forced the Jedi Council to allow him access to Anakin, citing their special connection from the events of Naboo. The Jedi, particularly Mace Windu, resisted this unprecedented request, but Palpatine's political authority left them no choice. Thus began a decades-long campaign of subtle corruption. Palpatine positioned himself as a father figure, a mentor who, unlike the rigid Jedi Council, seemed to truly understand Anakin's struggles. He validated Anakin's frustrations with the Jedi Order's restrictions, quietly undermining their teachings while appearing to simply offer a sympathetic ear. This manipulation was so subtle that even the wisest Jedi Masters failed to recognize it. The true genius of Palpatine's manipulation lay in his patience. He didn't push Anakin toward the dark side. He merely planted seeds of doubt, nurtured Anakin's natural rebelliousness, and waited. When Anakin wrestled with the death of his mother, Palpatine was there to suggest that true power might have saved her. When Anakin chafed against the Council's restrictions, Palpatine wondered aloud if they feared his potential. Every frustration, every doubt, every fear was carefully cultivated. But it was Anakin's greatest weakness, his desperate need to protect those he loved, that Palpatine ultimately exploited. When Anakin began experiencing visions of Padme dying in childbirth, Palpatine had prepared the perfect trap. In a masterfully orchestrated conversation in his office on Coruscant, he shared the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise, a Sith Lord so powerful he could prevent death itself. The tale was perfectly crafted to prey on Anakin's fears. Plagueis, Palpatine claimed, had mastered the power to create life itself, to keep those he cared about from dying. It was no coincidence that this story reached Anakin's ears just as he was tortured by visions of Padme's death. When Anakin asked if such power could be learned, Palpatine's response, "Not from a Jedi," served as the first direct step toward Anakin's fall. The revelation of Palpatine's true identity as Darth Sidious was the culmination of years of preparation. By the time Anakin discovered the truth, he was too emotionally invested in Palpatine's promises to fully turn against him. The offer to save Padme's life proved too powerful to resist, even though it meant betraying everything else he held dear. What makes this manipulation even more insidious is that Palpatine never actually possessed the power to save Padme. After Anakin's turn to the dark side, Palpatine revealed that they would need to discover the secret together, a stark admission that his promises had been lies. But by then, Anakin was too far gone to turn back. The execution of Order 66 marked the final stage of Palpatine's manipulation. With Anakin now fully committed as Darth Vader, Palpatine activated the secret protocol that turned the clone army against their Jedi commanders. Meanwhile, he dispatched Vader to the Jedi Temple, where the newly minted Sith Lord would demonstrate his loyalty by slaughtering even the youngest of the Jedi. The efficiency of this final act was breathtaking in its horror. While clone troopers across the galaxy turned on their Jedi generals thanks to hidden behavioral modification biochips, Palpatine personally contacted key commanders to ensure the elimination of high-priority targets. In a matter of hours, the Jedi Order was all but extinct, and Anakin Skywalker's transformation into Darth Vader was complete. This calculated destruction of Anakin Skywalker represents perhaps the greatest triumph of the Sith's grand plan. Through decades of careful manipulation, Palpatine transformed the Chosen One, destined to bring balance to the Force, into an agent of darkness. He didn't just corrupt Anakin. He broke him so completely that the galaxy's greatest hope became its greatest terror, and he did it all while maintaining his public persona as the benevolent leader of the Republic, making the eventual revelation of his true nature all the more devastating. The systematic manipulation of Anakin Skywalker serves as a chilling reminder of how vulnerability can be weaponized, how trust can be perverted, and how even the brightest light can be extinguished through careful, patient corruption. Palpatine didn't just create a Sith Lord, he engineered the fall of hope itself. The birth of Darth Vader began in fire on Mustafar. The final confrontation between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker took place on the landing platforms and facilities of the Separatist stronghold, surrounded by rivers of molten lava. Their lightsaber duel marked the end of one of the strongest partnerships in Jedi history. As the duel progressed, both combatants demonstrated their intimate knowledge of each other's fighting styles. They had trained together for over a decade, but now that same familiarity turned lethal. Each knew the other's moves, creating a deadly dance across the facility's structures as they floated down the lava river. The battle reached its climax on the banks of the lava river. Obi-Wan gained higher ground on a black sand embankment, warning Anakin not to attempt a leap across. In a moment of pride and rage, Anakin ignored his former master's warning. This fatal error in judgment would forever alter his existence. In one swift sequence, Obi-Wan's blade severed both of Anakin's legs around the knees and his left arm. The maimed body of the former Jedi rolled down the embankment, coming to rest at the edge of the lava flow. The intense heat ignited his clothing, and flames engulfed his body. The heat was so intense, it scorched his lungs as he desperately tried to drag himself away from the lava with his remaining mechanical arm. The burns Anakin suffered were catastrophic. Beyond the external charring of his flesh, the heat and toxic fumes severely damaged his internal organs. His lungs were particularly devastated, burned from the inside by the superheated air he had inhaled. The upper vertebrae of his spine were damaged, and the intense heat had destroyed most of his hair and skin. Emperor Palpatine arrived shortly after to retrieve what remained of his apprentice. Anakin was quickly transported to a medical facility on Coruscant, where an emergency medical team worked to stabilize his rapidly failing body. The Emperor personally oversaw the reconstruction, ensuring his apprentice would survive, though perhaps not comfortably. The medical procedures were extensive and torturous. Without anesthesia, the medical droids began by stabilizing his vital functions through the installation of a chest computer and pacemaker. Blood transfusions were performed, while cybernetic limbs were attached to replace his severed extremities. His damaged spine required extensive reconstruction, with synthetic vertebrae replacing the destroyed sections. The medical droids installed sensor webs throughout his cerebrum and along his spinal cord, allowing him to control his new cybernetic limbs. Electrical impulse generators were implanted in his remaining muscle fibers. His rib cage underwent partial removal to accommodate new synthetic organs, and his sternum was replaced with a perforated metal plate. His respiratory system required the most extensive reconstruction. A breathing apparatus was permanently installed, connecting directly to his damaged lungs. A hermetically sealed collar housed the vocabulator that would allow him to speak, as his original voice had been reduced to a whisper by the damage to his throat. The final stage of reconstruction involved encasing what remained of his scorched body in a sealed life support suit, topped by the iconic black mask that would become a symbol of terror throughout the galaxy. A control panel was installed on his chest to regulate his essential life functions. Vader's first moments of consciousness in his new form were marked by agony and disorientation. The suit's systems felt foreign and intrusive. His first words, spoken through his new vocabulator, revealed his one remaining concern. "Padme? Are you here? Are you all right?" Palpatine's response would complete Vader's psychological transformation. The Emperor informed him that in his anger, he had killed Padme. The news shattered what remained of Anakin Skywalker's spirit. His cry of no through the new vocabulator was accompanied by a display of force power that destroyed the medical droids and equipment around him. The initial adaptation period was marked by severe psychological trauma. Vader had to adjust not only to the constant pain of his injuries and cybernetics, but also to the knowledge that he had lost everything. His wife was dead, seemingly by his own hand. His unborn child, as far as he knew, had died with her. The Jedi Order he had once served was destroyed, largely by his own actions. In these early days, Vader struggled with basic movements. His new limbs responded sluggishly, and the weight of his armor made him feel constantly off balance. Every breath was a conscious effort, controlled by machines rather than natural impulse. The sound of his regulated breathing became a constant reminder of his condition. Yet, within this trauma lay the seeds of Vader's terrible power. His physical pain and emotional anguish fed directly into the dark side of the Force. Each moment of suffering strengthened his connection to it, and his rage at his condition fueled his mastery of dark side abilities. The being that emerged from the operating table was no longer Anakin Skywalker. The transformation into Darth Vader was complete, both physically and psychologically. The hero of the Clone Wars had been replaced by a Dark Lord sustained by machinery and driven by pain. The galaxy would soon learn to fear the sound of mechanically regulated breathing and the sight of a black mask emerging from the shadows. Every moment of Darth Vader's existence was an exercise in agony. The suit that kept him alive was also his eternal prison, a mobile torture chamber that transformed each breath, each movement, and each thought into an experience of pain. The nightmare began with the helmet. When sealed, dozens of needles would pierce Vader's skull and spine, forming a connection between flesh and machine that allowed him to control his artificial limbs. These neural needles burrowed deep into his tissue, sending constant streams of data to the suit's central computers while causing unrelenting pain. Rather than provide relief, these needles were actually designed to amplify his suffering, as Palpatine had falsely claimed they contained pain-relieving chemicals. The visual systems in his mask forced him to see the world through a blood-red filter. His artificial eyepieces made every view a crimson nightmare, distorting natural colors into various shades of red and black. The lenses protected his damaged corneas and retinas while providing infrared and ultraviolet vision, but at the cost of never seeing the world in its true colors again. Sound reached him as if he were perpetually underwater. His eardrums had been melted away on Mustafar, requiring audio implants that distorted every noise. The system frequently picked up feedback and ambient sounds, making it difficult for him to determine the direction or distance of noises. Even his own iconic breathing came to him as a warped, mechanical rasp. The suit itself was a prison of intentionally poor design. The inner lining caught and pulled at his burned flesh with every movement. The shoulder armor alone weighed over 12 kilograms, making it nearly impossible for him to raise his arms above his head. His boots never quite fit right, leaving him constantly off balance. The weight of the entire apparatus put immense stress on his damaged spine, requiring ongoing vertebrae replacements. His artificial limbs responded sluggishly to his commands, requiring immense concentration for even basic movements. The prosthetics connected to his truncated bone and muscle through crude mechanical interfaces that caused constant friction and discomfort. Even the simple act of walking required careful attention to maintain his balance in the cumbersome suit. The control panel on his chest regulated his breathing, but also served as a constant source of irritation. Buttons would beep randomly without reason, and the regulated breathing pattern never felt natural. He couldn't speed up or slow down his breathing rate, even during physical exertion. The ventilator forced air into his scarred lungs at a predetermined pace, regardless of his body's actual needs. His flesh constantly chafed against the suit's interior. The leather bodysuit that covered his burned skin was not designed for comfort, but for function, protecting his wounds from infection while causing persistent irritation. The suit needed to be hermetically sealed, which meant he could never remove it outside of specially pressurized chambers. The psychological torment matched the physical agony. Vader existed in perpetual sensory isolation from the world around him. Everything he experienced came through layers of artificial processing. He could not feel natural air on his skin, smell without filters, or experience direct contact with anything. His environment always reached him through the barrier of machines and computers. Temperature regulation was another constant battle. The suit poorly managed his body heat, leaving him alternating between too hot and too cold. The environmental controls were basic and inefficient, another intentional design flaw to ensure his continuous discomfort. Sweat would collect inside the suit with no way to evaporate, adding to his physical misery. The only time Vader found any relief was in his meditation chamber, where specialized pressurization allowed him to remove his mask and helmet. But even these moments were brief, as his damaged lungs could not function long without assistance. The sessions in his hyperbaric chamber served more to maintain his equipment than provide genuine comfort. Each day required intensive maintenance. Diagnostic scans monitored his vital signs through an array of sensors and needles embedded throughout the suit. His synthetic organs needed regular adjustment, and his prosthetics required constant calibration. Medical droids performed daily maintenance on both his organic and cybernetic parts, another process that brought its own share of pain. The suit's vulnerabilities added another layer of constant anxiety. The control panel on his chest was theoretically capable of being disabled by a precise hit. Electromagnetic pulses could potentially interfere with his life support systems. Even water posed a serious threat, as his suit was not completely waterproof despite its sealed nature. Yet this perpetual torment served a purpose in the dark side of the Force. Each moment of suffering fed Vader's connection to pain and rage, strengthening his power. The agony that was meant to weaken him instead became fuel for his hatred, transforming his mobile life support unit into a monument to the power of the dark side. In this way, the suit that imprisoned him also empowered him, turning his eternal torture into a source of terrible strength. Darth Vader's early missions as the Emperor's enforcer began while he was still mastering basic movement in his suit. His first assignment took him to the Coruscant Detention Center, where he interrogated a Jedi Padawan named Dahama for information about Obi-Wan Kenobi's location. Despite his physical limitations, Vader's presence alone proved terrifying enough to break his prisoner's will. The true test of Vader's capabilities came during the Jedi ambush on Kessel. Following intelligence about surviving Jedi, Vader walked into what he quickly discovered was a trap. The engagement revealed both the strengths and weaknesses of his new form. Though one of the Jedi managed to sever his prosthetic arm, Vader emerged victorious with support from the 501st Clone Troopers, leaving all 12 Jedi dead. Combat in the suit initially proved challenging. The weight of his armor made quick movements difficult, and the computerized breathing system couldn't adjust its pace during physical exertion. The suit's poor temperature regulation meant he would quickly overheat during intense combat. Yet Vader turned these apparent weaknesses into strengths, learning to use the suit's weight and his cybernetic limbs to generate overwhelming power in his attacks. His return to the Jedi Temple marked another crucial early mission. Vader accessed the Jedi archives, hunting for information about survivors while simultaneously eliminating any remaining Jedi he encountered. This mission served a dual purpose, allowing him to gather intelligence while testing his growing combat abilities in familiar surroundings. Vader's approach to lightsaber combat underwent a complete transformation to accommodate his new physical form. He maintained Form 5 as his foundation but radically modified how he employed it. The weight and power of his cybernetic limbs allowed him to deliver devastating strikes that could overwhelm opponents through sheer force. His artificial arms could generate far more power than natural limbs, turning basic attacks into potentially lethal blows. However, Vader recognized that pure aggression left him vulnerable. To protect his vital life support systems, he incorporated elements of Form 3, Sorisu. This defensive style provided him with better protection against attacks targeting his control panel or breathing apparatus. The integration of Sorisu proved crucial in several early encounters where opponents attempted to exploit his suit's weaknesses. From Count Dooku's teachings during the Clone Wars, Vader also adopted aspects of Form 2 Makashi. This precise, efficiency-focused style helped him overcome some of his suit's mobility restrictions. Makashi's emphasis on preventing disarmament became particularly important given his reliance on cybernetic limbs. Every movement was calculated to maintain his guard while maximizing striking power. The result was a unique hybrid fighting style unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Vader could seamlessly switch between overwhelming offense and nearly impenetrable defense. His cybernetically enhanced strength allowed him to power through traditional blocks and parries. When opponents attempted to exploit his reduced mobility, he would shift to precise economical movements that turned their aggression against them. During this period, Vader began working with the Inquisitors, training them in Jedi hunting techniques. This role as a teacher forced him to analyze and articulate how he had adapted to his limitations. He drilled the Inquisitors in identifying and exploiting weaknesses, drawing from his own experiences of learning to fight in his restrictive suit. Emperor Palpatine provided Vader with a list of high-priority targets who had survived Order 66. Among them was Jocasta Nu, the former Jedi librarian. These carefully selected missions allowed Vader to refine his combat techniques while eliminating serious threats to the Empire. Each engagement taught him more about his capabilities and limitations. The psychological impact of Vader's appearance became another weapon in his arsenal. The sight of his black armor and the sound of his regulated breathing often paralyzed opponents with fear before combat even began. He learned to use this intimidation factor strategically, augmenting it with deliberate, measured movements that amplified his menacing presence. Vader's early missions established a pattern that would define his role in the Empire. He operated as both hunter and executioner, pursuing high-value targets that required his unique combination of force mastery and combat prowess. His successes in these missions, despite the restrictions of his suit, demonstrated why he became the Emperor's most valued enforcer. The process of mastering combat in the suit was ongoing. Each mission presented new challenges that forced Vader to adapt and refine his techniques. What began as compensation for his limitations evolved into a devastating fighting style that struck fear throughout the galaxy. His early experiences as the Emperor's enforcer laid the groundwork for the terror he would become. This period marked the true birth of the warrior that the galaxy would come to fear. The restrictions of his suit, rather than limiting him, forced him to become more lethal than ever. The pain and rage from his condition fueled his connection to the dark side. while his methodical adaptation to his new form made him nearly unstoppable in combat. The legend of Darth Vader, begun in fire on Mustafar, was forged into reality during these early Imperial years. The Great Jedi Purge began immediately after Order 66 in 19 BBY, transforming from a military operation into a systematic hunt for survivors. Darth Vader, newly risen from the ashes of Anakin Skywalker, spearheaded this campaign of extermination with methodical precision. To expand the reach of the Purge, Vader established the Inquisitorius program in 19 BBY. Based in a fortress on the ocean moon Nur in the Mustafar system, the Inquisitorius recruited exclusively from former Jedi who had fallen to the dark side. The first and most prominent recruit was the Grand Inquisitor, a former Jedi Temple guard who personally answered to Vader. Vader's training of the Inquisitors reflected his own brutal transformation. Sessions routinely pushed recruits to exhaustion and injury. He employed psychological manipulation through the dark side, ruthless dueling practices, and harsh discipline, including force choking. Those who survived this training emerged as efficient hunters, armed with distinctive double-bladed lightsabers and backed by elite Purge troopers. The Inquisitorius operated on a strict hierarchy, with members ranked by numbers. Lower numbers typically indicated higher rank, creating fierce competition among the hunters. The fifth brother, for instance, claimed to be next in line for the position of Grand Inquisitor, highlighting the internal power struggles within the organization. Despite their fearsome reputation, the Inquisitors weren't invincible. The resistance cell known as the Spectres, led by Jedi Kanan Jarrus and his apprentice Ezra Bridger, proved particularly troublesome. The Battle of Malachor marked a significant defeat when the fifth brother, seventh sister, and eighth brother were killed by Darth Maul and Kanan Jarrus. The Fortress Inquisitorius on Nur became both training ground and tomb. By 9 BBY, several Jedi Masters, including Coleman Kaj and Terra Sinube, were entombed there, having resisted attempts to turn them to the dark side. These failures highlighted the limitations of the Inquisitorius program, though they didn't diminish its terror. Vader maintained personal involvement in high-priority hunts throughout the Purge. His presence alone often broke the will of hiding Jedi before combat even began. The sound of his regulated breathing became a herald of doom for Force sensitives across the galaxy. While Imperial propaganda claimed Vader had single-handedly slaughtered hundreds of Jedi, the confirmed kills under his personal blade were fewer, but no less impressive. The Purge's methods extended beyond simple execution. The Empire established a robust intelligence network to identify potential Force-sensitive children. These children were either eliminated or, in rare cases, taken for conversion to the dark side. The Inquisitors gained authority to override local Imperial officers when pursuing these targets, demonstrating the Purge's priority in Imperial hierarchy. Rather than rely solely on brute force, the Purge employed sophisticated tactics. False distress signals lured compassionate Jedi into traps. Captured Padawans were tortured for information about their masters. Sacred Jedi sites were monitored for returning survivors. The methodical nature of these operations reflected Vader's strategic approach to hunting his former brothers and sisters. The Inquisitorius program's effectiveness ultimately declined due to internal competition and prioritization of personal ambition over collective goals. The Empire eventually stopped replacing fallen Inquisitors, relying more heavily on Vader himself for high-priority targets. This shift recognized that while the Inquisitors served their purpose, none could match the Dark Lord's combination of power and purpose. By the time of the original trilogy, the organized phase of the Great Jedi Purge had largely concluded. The systematic elimination of Force-sensitive individuals and the terror inspired by Vader's hunters had driven any surviving Jedi deep into hiding. Those who managed to escape likely did so by completely disconnecting from the Force, as maintaining any active connection risked detection by the dark side's most relentless servant. After the destruction of the first Death Star, Darth Vader began assembling a secret power base beyond Imperial oversight. This covert operation started with his recruitment of Dr. Cheli Lona Afra, an unscrupulous archaeologist who specialized in ancient weapons and droids. Vader encountered Afra while she was stealing a protocol droid personality matrix, recognizing her skills could serve his hidden agenda. Afra's first mission for Vader involved acquiring two specialized droids, 000, a protocol droid designed for torture and interrogation, and BT-1, a heavily armed blastomech unit. These droids became crucial assets in Vader's secret operations, providing capabilities outside standard Imperial protocols. The cornerstone of Vader's private army came from Geonosis, where Afra helped him steal and reactivate a droid factory. This facility allowed Vader to produce BX-series droid commandos, elite battle droids that far surpassed standard combat units. These droids featured titanium armor, built-in fusion cutters, and advanced combat programming that made them formidable opponents. BX-series commandos proved particularly valuable due to their advanced capabilities. Each unit cost approximately 17,900 credits, reflecting their superior design compared to basic battle droids. They possessed exceptional close-quarters combat skills, infiltration abilities, and could be equipped with various weapons, including thermal detonators and sniper rifles. Vader's secret forces operated parallel to his official Imperial duties, allowing him to pursue personal objectives while maintaining his role as the Emperor's enforcer. This dual structure proved especially valuable after he discovered Luke Skywalker's existence. Afra and her droids helped confirm Luke's identity and connection to Vader through covert missions to Tatooine and Naboo. The relationship between Vader and Afra remained tense throughout their collaboration. While she proved invaluable to his operations, Vader maintained control through implicit threats. Afra worked knowing that failure or betrayal would result in immediate elimination, a management style reflecting Vader's approach to all his secret resources. Beyond droids and specialized agents, Vader commanded elements of the Imperial military that operated under his direct authority rather than standard Imperial command. This included portions of the fleet that could be diverted for his personal missions without drawing immediate attention from Imperial oversight. These secret forces gave Vader significant autonomy in pursuing his own agenda, particularly in matters relating to Force-sensitive individuals. While officially leading the Inquisitorius in hunting surviving Jedi, his private army allowed him to conduct operations unknown even to the Emperor. Project Harvester exemplified how Vader used these resources to extend his influence. This initiative identified Force-sensitive individuals within Imperial institutions, allowing Vader to either eliminate threats or secure potential assets before they came to wider Imperial attention. These operations included the capture of Force-sensitive children, including an infant from Jedi Master Eth Koth. The existence of these forces remained largely unknown to Imperial leadership, creating a power base separate from both the Imperial military hierarchy and the Emperor's direct control. This independence proved crucial as Vader pursued his own objectives while maintaining his position as the Empire's supreme enforcer. Vader's private army represented a significant investment in resources and personnel, far beyond what official Imperial channels would have authorized. The advanced capabilities of his BX series commandos, combined with specialized assets like 000 and BT, provided him with military options outside standard Imperial protocols. The true extent of Vader's secret forces remained hidden from most of the galaxy, their operations carefully concealed behind his official duties. This shadowy army served as both insurance against potential betrayal and a tool for pursuing objectives that even the Emperor wasn't privy to, demonstrating Vader's long-term planning and strategic autonomy within the Empire. Darth Vader's apprenticeship under Palpatine marked a stark departure from traditional Sith training. The Emperor deliberately engineered life-threatening situations, forcing his damaged apprentice to confront monsters, Sith agents, and Inquisitors in brutal trials. Each confrontation served to break Vader's remaining connections to his former self, purging lingering traces of Anakin Skywalker through calculated trauma. Palpatine's psychological manipulation proved as ruthless as the physical trials. He treated Vader as both weapon and chess piece, offering tantalizing glimpses of power while engineering scenarios designed to shape his apprentice's responses. This methodical reconstruction transformed Vader from fallen Jedi into the dark side's premier enforcer, though the lessons in manipulation would eventually be turned against the Master himself. Under this harsh tutelage, Vader's command of the dark side grew exponentially. His telekinetic abilities reached devastating new heights, allowing him to execute precise force pushes and pulls that could tear apart machinery or crush opponents inside armor. The signature force choke that would terrify Imperial officers originated in this period, refined through countless applications. His cybernetic enhancements amplified these dark side abilities. Documentation confirmed Vader could move at speeds of 1/13 of a second, his mechanical limbs driven by force-enhanced reflexes. He demonstrated the raw power to stop and completely dismantle an AT-AT walker through telekinesis alone, a feat that demonstrated his unprecedented combination of mechanical and force augmentation. Yet, his suit imposed crucial limitations. The iconic life support system that kept him alive also prevented him from channeling Force lightning, as the electrical energy would short-circuit his own systems. This restriction forced Vader to develop alternative expressions of dark side power, particularly in environmental manipulation and telekinetic assault. The culmination of Vader's evolution as a Sith Lord manifested in his fortress on Mustafar. Built atop an ancient Sith cave marking a powerful dark side vergence, the structure required 9 separate attempts before successful completion. Each failure pushed Vader deeper into darkness as he worked with the spirit of ancient Sith Lord Darth Vader to perfect the design. The fortress's location carried profound significance, overlooking the exact spot where Obi-Wan Kenobi had dealt the injuries that necessitated Vader's cybernetic transformation. This deliberate positioning allowed Vader to channel his perpetual agony into dark side energy, using his pain to further amplify the site's natural power. Momin's architectural design served multiple functions. The castle's distinctive spires, resembling massive tuning forks, were precisely calculated to focus and amplify dark side energies. Medical facilities housed Bacta tanks, where Vader could temporarily exist outside his suit within specially pressurized environments. The entire structure was guarded by specialized lava troopers in black armor, commanded by Vader's fanatically loyal attendant, Vani. Beneath these practical functions lay Vader's secret obsession, attempting to breach the barrier between life and death to resurrect Padme Amidala. The fortress's design incorporated ancient Sith architecture specifically aligned to channel sufficient dark side power for opening such a portal. This hidden agenda revealed that despite his transformation, Vader remained haunted by his past actions. The relationship between master and apprentice evolved as Vader's power grew. While he learned to transform his constant physical and emotional agony into dark side strength, he also developed increasing resistance to Palpatine's absolute control. The Emperor's brutal training methods had forged not just an enforcer, but a Sith Lord capable of pursuing his own ambitions. Vader's fortress demonstrated this growing independence. Its ability to channel Force energy extended to manipulating Mustafar's environment, creating lava storms that reflected its master's rage. The structure became such a powerful dark side nexus that it would later draw dark side cultists even after Vader's death, its very stones saturated with dark side energy. Through their master and apprentice dynamic, Palpatine shaped Vader into something unprecedented, a cybernetic Sith Lord whose very existence pushed the boundaries of both technology and the Force. While his mechanical components prevented certain traditional Sith techniques, they also amplified his existing abilities to levels unmatched in recorded history. Under Palpatine's merciless guidance, the fallen Chosen One transcended both his Jedi origins and traditional Sith limitations. The fortress on Mustafar stood as the ultimate expression of this transformation. Its very construction defied natural law, using dark side energy to maintain its impossible architecture. The persistent pain and rage Vader experienced at the sight of his greatest defeat became fuel for ever greater displays of dark side power, creating a feedback loop of suffering and strength that perfectly embodied the Sith philosophy. In the years following Order 66, Obi-Wan Kenobi's clash with Darth Vader represented more than another lightsaber duel. Their encounters marked a definitive transformation in their relationship and cemented Vader's commitment to the dark side. Their first battle demonstrated how completely Anakin Skywalker had been consumed by Vader. Operating with cold precision rather than his former passionate style, Vader systematically dismantled Kenobi's defenses. His methodical assault reflected years of dwelling on their previous encounter on Mustafar, having spent countless hours analyzing how to counter his old master's techniques. The emotional weight of their reunion manifested in raw displays of dark side power. Vader's rage, refined through years of suffering, expressed itself in brutal Force displays. The same hands that had once exchanged friendly sparring blows with Kenobi now sought to crush and destroy. Each strike carried the accumulated weight of perceived betrayal and abandonment. Their confrontation forced both men to confront uncomfortable truths. When Kenobi addressed him as Anakin, Vader's response was unequivocal. "Anakin is gone. I am what remains." This declaration wasn't merely meant to intimidate. It represented Vader's genuine belief that he had murdered his former self, viewing Anakin Skywalker as a weakness to be eliminated rather than an identity to be reclaimed. Kenobi's apology, "I'm sorry, Anakin," for all of it, revealed his own complex emotions regarding his former apprentice's fall. But Vader rejected any suggestion of victimhood or external blame. His response, "You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did," demonstrated his complete ownership of his transformation. The choice to embrace darkness had been his alone. The duel's conclusion proved fateful for both warriors. Kenobi's victory reinforced what their earlier encounter on Mustafar had established. Despite Vader's immense power, his former master retained the ability to defeat him. That reality tormented Vader, fueling his obsession with destroying the living reminder of his past life. The emotional aftermath of their encounter drew the Emperor's attention. Palpatine noted that Vader's feelings toward his old master had potentially weakened him, detecting lingering conflict in his apprentice. This observation pushed Vader to more aggressively suppress any remaining emotional connections to his past, doubling down on his commitment to the dark side. Rather than diminish his hatred, their rematch intensified it. Vader's obsession with destroying Kenobi evolved from simple revenge into something more fundamental: the need to erase the last person who truly knew him as Anakin Skywalker. As long as Kenobi lived, he served as a living bridge to a past Vader desperately wanted to destroy. Their battle took place on a desolate, rocky planet beneath a night sky, a fitting backdrop for their shattered relationship. The environment itself seemed to reflect the barren emotional landscape between them, every feature shaped by erosion and destruction. Just as their former bond had been corrupted by the dark side, Vader's threat, "Then you will die," carried more than murderous intent. It represented his ultimate goal: to finally sever all connections to Anakin Skywalker by destroying the man who had trained him. Each clash of their lightsabers represented years of festering hatred and betrayal, concentrated into singular moments of violence. The encounter reshaped Vader's subsequent behavior within the Empire. Having publicly declared Anakin Skywalker dead, he embraced his role as the Emperor's enforcer with renewed vigor. Any hesitation or internal conflict was burned away, replaced by cold determination and unrestrained dark side power. Their rematch served as a crucial step in Vader's psychological evolution. By rejecting Kenobi's attempts to reach Anakin Skywalker, he recommitted himself to the dark side. The emotional turbulence of their reunion was transformed into fuel for hatred, driving Vader to further immerse himself in darkness. The revelation that changed Darth Vader's galaxy began with a simple name: Skywalker. After the destruction of the Death Star, Vader became obsessed with identifying the Force-sensitive pilot responsible. He dispatched probe droids and bounty hunters across the galaxy, with Boba Fett eventually uncovering the pilot's identity. Learning his son had survived shattered Vader's understanding of the past 2 decades. Palpatine had told him Padme died before giving birth. Now he knew not only that his child lived, but that Obi-Wan had hidden Luke on Tatooine. The knowledge transformed Vader's priorities completely. Where before he had served as the Empire's ruthless enforcer, now every action became calculated around his newfound son. He assembled a personal network of spies and informants focused solely on tracking Luke's movements. One of Vader's first direct encounters with Luke came during the Battle of Rogus Vas. Though he attempted to capture his son alive, Luke crashed his X-Wing directly into Vader's TIE Advanced, sending both crashing to the planet's surface. The battle that followed demonstrated Vader's new approach. Despite Luke attacking him with clear, lethal intent, Vader consistently attempted to subdue rather than kill his son. The revelation strained Vader's relationship with Emperor Palpatine. Though Palpatine initially appeared to share Vader's interest in turning Luke to the dark side, their ultimate goals differed fundamentally. Where Palpatine saw a potential new apprentice, Vader saw a chance to reclaim his family and overthrow his master's reign. The tension between these competing visions would define their relationship moving forward. On Cloud City, Vader orchestrated an elaborate trap for Luke, using his friends as bait. Their lightsaber duel in the carbon-freezing chamber marked the first true confrontation between father and son. Even as they fought, Vader attempted to turn Luke rather than destroy him, offering him a chance to rule the galaxy together as father and son. When Luke refused and chose likely death over joining him, Vader felt the same anguish he had experienced losing Padme. The knowledge of Luke's existence awakened something long dormant in Vader: hope. For the first time since his fall to the dark side, he had a purpose beyond serving the Emperor. His son represented everything he had lost, a living connection to Padme and his former self. This hope, however, manifested as obsession. Vader became consumed with finding Luke, turning him to the dark side and fulfilling what he saw as their shared destiny. This fixation affected Vader's command style. Officers serving under him noted his increasing preoccupation with Luke's capture. He diverted Imperial resources to the search, often prioritizing leads about Luke's whereabouts over other military objectives. Those who failed him in this specific mission faced particularly harsh consequences. After Cloud City, Vader's focus shifted from capture to preparation. He began gathering intelligence about Luke's training and abilities, studying his son's growing power in the Force. Every report of Luke's activities was carefully analyzed, with Vader tracking his son's development as both a Jedi and a military leader. The relationship between father and son became the center of Vader's existence. 2 decades of emptiness and hatred gave way to a singular driving purpose: turning Luke to the dark side, not for the Emperor's benefit, but to fulfill his own vision of bringing order to the galaxy with his son at his side. This obsession would ultimately lead to both his greatest test and his final redemption. Vader's discovery of Luke represented the first crack in his identity as a Sith Lord. Though he remained a fearsome warrior of the dark side, his actions became increasingly driven by personal attachment, the very thing the Sith condemned. His love for his son, though twisted by decades of darkness, proved stronger than his loyalty to either the Empire or the dark side itself. For nearly 20 years, Vader had existed as little more than a weapon of the Empire. The knowledge of Luke's survival changed that fundamentally. He was no longer simply the Emperor's enforcer, but a father with his own ambitions and desires. This transformation would ultimately lead to the fulfillment of the prophecy of the Chosen One, though not in any way the Jedi or Sith had foreseen. Following his revelation about Luke, Vader's encounters with his children became increasingly charged with unspoken meaning. On the first Death Star, he came face to face with his daughter without realizing it. Princess Leia's interrogation marked their first direct confrontation, with Vader deploying a torture droid to extract information about the rebel base. Despite noticing her resemblance to Padme, the Dark Lord remained blind to their true connection. Leia's resistance to his mental probes impressed and frustrated him. Her strength of will matched his own, though neither realized this trait ran in their blood. The interrogation proved futile, with Leia's mind remaining closed to his dark side abilities. Later, during the Battle of Scarif's aftermath, their paths crossed again aboard the Tantive 4. Leia attempted to use diplomatic immunity as a shield, but Vader saw through her deception immediately. Their encounters carried echoes of Padme. Leia's fierce dedication to democracy and resistance to tyranny mirrored her mother's final moments. When she stood against Vader, unflinching before his towering form, she unknowingly channeled both her parents' strength. Yet the Dark Lord remained oblivious to these signs, his awareness clouded by decades of darkness. The internal war between Vader and Anakin intensified with each family encounter. In his meditation chamber removed from his mask, Vader's scarred face reflected his fractured psyche. He convinced himself that Anakin Skywalker was dead, yet Luke's existence kept proving otherwise. Every reminder of his son brought unwanted memories of his former self surging to the surface. This psychological torment manifested physically. During his private moments, Vader would experience tremors in his mechanical hands, his control over the dark side momentarily weakened by intrusive thoughts of his past. The conflict between father and son reached new heights after Cloud City. Luke's rejection of the dark side both enraged and secretly impressed Vader, stirring remnants of Anakin's idealism. His meditation sessions became increasingly turbulent. The dark side no longer flowed as smoothly through him when thoughts of Luke intruded. Vader found himself remembering moments from his past, pod racing on Tatooine, training with Obi-Wan, falling in love with Padme. These memories brought not just pain, but dangerous whispers of regret. The suit that had been his prison for 2 decades became even more confining as his internal struggle intensified. Its regulated breathing could not keep pace with his emotional turmoil. The constant pain that had fueled his darkness for so long began competing with a different kind of ache, longing for the family he had lost and might still reclaim. Deep within his fortress on Mustafar, Vader attempted to purge these feelings through immersion in the dark side. Yet even here, surrounded by Sith artifacts and dark energy, he could not fully silence Anakin's voice. The lava flows outside his castle served as constant reminders of his transformation, but now they also reminded him of what he had sacrificed. The Emperor sensed this conflict in his apprentice. Vader's obsession with Luke threatened to undo decades of careful manipulation. During their communications, Palpatine noted subtle changes in Vader's behavior, hesitation where there had once been certainty, conflict where there had been pure darkness. The very emotions that had helped turn Anakin to the dark side now threatened Vader's commitment to it. Each encounter with his children pulled more of Anakin to the surface. Though Vader maintained his terrifying presence, executing officers and crushing resistance with mechanical efficiency, his inner turmoil grew. The dark side remained strong with him, but it no longer held the same absolute sway over his actions. Vader's lightsaber combat during this period reflected his internal struggle. His typically precise and overwhelming style became occasionally erratic, especially in confrontations related to Luke. The mechanical consistency that had made him legendary showed moments of hesitation, particularly when facing opponents who reminded him of his past. In his private moments, Vader would replay his confrontations with Luke, analyzing every word and gesture. The offer to rule together as father and son haunted him. It represented everything he had originally turned to the dark side to achieve, power to protect his family. Yet Luke's rejection forced him to question whether his path had truly been necessary. The conflict reached its peak during his final year. Vader found himself caught between his master's demands and his growing desire to protect his son. The same protective instinct that had driven Anakin to the dark side now began pulling Vader back toward the light. Each report of Luke's activities brought both pride and pain, further fracturing his commitment to the dark side. Through each family confrontation, the figure of Padme loomed in Vader's consciousness. Leia's defiance carried echoes of her mother's last words. Luke's rejection of the dark side reflected Padme's final plea for Anakin to turn back. These ghostly reminders of his greatest loss became impossible to ignore, forcing Vader to confront the choices that had led him to his current state. The final confrontation between father and son took place in the Emperor's throne room aboard the second Death Star. Here, amidst the backdrop of the rebellion's last desperate assault, Vader faced not just his son but his own destiny. The throne room's location had been carefully chosen by Palpatine, ensuring the upcoming conflict would play out exactly as he envisioned. Luke surrendered himself to Imperial forces on Endor, believing there was still good in his father. Vader's first internal conflict emerged during this surrender, when he sensed Luke's presence and pure intentions. As he escorted Luke to the Emperor, Vader struggled with emotions he thought long buried. Luke's unwavering faith in his redemption pierced through decades of darkness. The Emperor began his final manipulation, goading Luke toward anger while Vader stood silent witness. Palpatine revealed the entire battle station was operational and that the rebel fleet was moving into a trap. Each revelation was calculated to push Luke toward hatred, following the same path that had corrupted his father. When Luke finally gave in to his anger, the lightsaber duel that followed was unlike any other in Vader's experience. His son fought with raw emotion, demonstrating power that genuinely surprised the Dark Lord. The clash of red and green blades echoed through the throne room as father and son engaged in their final confrontation. Vader's measured defense demonstrated his internal conflict. Though he maintained his attack, his usual ruthless efficiency was absent. The dark side no longer flowed through him with its customary strength. Each exchange of blows carried the weight of their shared history and potential future. The duel's turning point came when Vader probed Luke's thoughts and discovered the existence of his sister. His threat to turn Leia to the dark side triggered something primal in Luke. The young Jedi's subsequent assault drove Vader back, overwhelming the Dark Lord's defenses with pure fury. The intensity of Luke's attack forced Vader to his knees, culminating in the loss of his mechanical hand. Looking at his son's artificial hand, then at his own severed mechanical limb, Vader experienced a moment of profound recognition. The parallel was unmistakable, his son following the same path of loss and pain that had led to his own fall. When Luke realized this too, and defiantly threw away his lightsaber, declaring himself a Jedi, Vader felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: pride. The Emperor's response was immediate and brutal. Force lightning erupted from his fingers, engulfing Luke in waves of agony. Vader rose to his feet, watching his son suffer as Palpatine's lightning coursed through him. In this moment, the conflict between Vader and Anakin reached its climax. For the first time in 23 years, Vader's thoughts turned not to power or revenge, but to love. Watching Luke writhe in pain, memories flooded back. Shmi's death in his arms, Padme's plea for him to turn back, every moment of loss and regret that had led him to this point. The mechanical breathing that had terrified the galaxy for decades faltered. His decision came not from hatred of Palpatine or desire for power, but from pure paternal love. Anakin Skywalker emerged from the shell of Vader, seizing his former master and lifting him high. The Emperor's lightning played over Vader's armor, shorting out vital systems as he carried Palpatine to the reactor shaft. With his final act of strength, he hurled the Emperor to his death. The sacrifice cost him everything. His suit, already damaged by the lightning, began failing completely. The breathing apparatus that had kept him alive for over 2 decades stuttered and died. Yet in these final moments, Vader felt no fear. For the first time since his fall to the dark side, he was at peace. Luke dragged his father to a shuttle bay, refusing to leave him behind. Here, Vader made his final request, to see his son with his own eyes, not through the red lenses that had colored his vision for so long. As Luke removed the mask, Anakin Skywalker looked upon his son's face clearly for the first and last time. In his final moments, Anakin spoke not of power or destiny, but of Luke's faith in him. His last words confirmed what Luke had believed all along: there was still good in him. As Anakin Skywalker died, he finally fulfilled the prophecy of the Chosen One, not through power or control, but through an act of selfless love. Anakin's return to the light was so complete that he manifested as a Force ghost in his original form, purified of the darkness that had consumed him. Standing alongside Obi-Wan and Yoda, he watched his children celebrate the victory his sacrifice had helped achieve. The being who had brought fear to countless worlds died as he had begun. Anakin Skywalker, a former slave who became a hero. The legacy of Darth Vader echoed through the galaxy long after his final breath aboard the second Death Star. Despite his redemption, the terror his name inspired persisted across countless worlds. Systems that had never seen his imposing figure firsthand still whispered stories of the Dark Lord who could kill with a thought. In the immediate aftermath of his death, the galaxy struggled to reconcile the two versions of Vader. To those who witnessed his redemption, he was Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one who fulfilled the prophecy. To the vast majority of the galaxy, he remained the Empire's merciless enforcer. This duality would shape galactic politics for generations. The revelation of Vader's true identity had devastating consequences for his children's lives. When the truth of Leia's parentage became public, her promising career in the New Republic Senate was destroyed. Despite her heroic role in the rebellion, many couldn't separate her from her father's dark legacy. The scandal forced her out of the Senate and into a military leadership role with the Resistance. Luke's attempt to rebuild the Jedi Order carried the weight of Vader's shadow. His students whispered about their master's parentage, wondering if the darkness that had corrupted Vader might manifest in Luke as well. This legacy of fear would ultimately contribute to the Order's destruction. The most profound impact of Vader's legacy manifested in his grandson, Ben Solo. Born to Leia Organa and Han Solo, Ben grew up unaware of his connection to the infamous Sith Lord. The secret of his heritage, kept from him by his family, became a devastating revelation that helped push him toward the dark side. Upon learning of his relation to Vader, Ben Solo became obsessed with his grandfather's power. He recovered Vader's charred helmet, speaking to it in private moments as he sought connection with the dark side. Like his grandfather before him, Ben Solo's fall would reshape the galaxy's future. Taking the name Kylo Ren, Ben attempted to follow in Vader's footsteps. He adopted similar visuals, wearing a black mask and cape that deliberately echoed his grandfather's iconic appearance. His combat style, particularly his aggressive lightsaber technique, drew inspiration from stories of Vader's battles. Yet Kylo Ren fundamentally misunderstood Vader's true legacy. Where Vader's final act had been one of sacrificial love, Kylo focused solely on his grandfather's power and dominance. He viewed Vader's return to the light as weakness rather than redemption, pledging to finish what Vader had started by bringing order to the galaxy through power. Vader's influence extended beyond his family. Imperial remnants treated him as a martyred figure, using his image to recruit followers to their cause. Some worlds that had suffered under his rule established memorials to his victims, ensuring future generations would remember the cost of embracing darkness. The Skywalker lineage carried both the burden and the promise of Vader's legacy. Each generation faced the same struggle between light and dark that had defined Anakin's life. Luke's isolation on Ahch-To, Leia's transition from senator to general, and Ben's fall to darkness all traced their roots to the choices Vader had made. Even Vader's technological legacy endured. His advanced life support systems, though crude by later standards, influenced the development of cybernetic medicine. The Empire's medical facilities studied his suit's design, using the knowledge gained to advance the field of prosthetic limb development. The site of Vader's fortress on Mustafar became a place of dark side pilgrimage. Force sensitives drawn to the dark side would journey there, seeking to commune with the lingering echoes of his power. The fortress itself stood as a monument to both the strength and the isolation of the dark side. Vader's tactical innovations remained relevant decades after his death. His emphasis on personal leadership in combat, demonstrated throughout the galactic civil war, influenced military doctrine on both sides of subsequent conflicts. The First Order particularly studied his methods of crushing resistance through overwhelming force and fear. Perhaps most significantly, Vader's story became a cautionary tale about the price of power. Those who knew the full truth of his life, death, and redemption saw in it the eternal struggle between light and dark. His fall and redemption proved that even those who had succumbed completely to darkness could find their way back to the light. This complex legacy, encompassing both the darkness of Vader and the redemption of Anakin, continued to shape galactic events long after the Empire's fall. In the end, Darth Vader's greatest impact wasn't measured in worlds conquered or Jedi slain, but in the enduring lesson that choice, not destiny, determines one's path.